7th, 2022 to our 9 a.m. strategic planning meeting. Can I not say it today? It is 9:04. Let the record reflect that we have all three commissioners are present, our executive management team. We are being joined by Kathleen Torella from Community Services and Joel Crosby, our leasing agent with our 8th Avenue building. And they're going to start our discussion regarding the 8th Avenue building sale and Community Services Department relocation discussion. So Kathleen, I will let you start.
Thank you, Chair Cooney and fellow commissioners. I am presenting in Tony Hall's absence. He actually created this presentation and did a lot of work, and unfortunately is ill today. So I will be taking over the presentation. So if you have questions along the way, please feel free to ask them or interrupt me at any point in time.
I think Ron has it up, so you can go ahead and start.
Thank you. So Ron, next slide, please. So to begin with, the sale of the building right now is scheduled this is all as of what we know as of today, is being scheduled for February 28, 2022. And we are planning to vacate all of the floors that our department resides on currently, except for 2. And this will allow Spokane Regional Health District as the tenant to the new buyer to begin their TIs on the vacant floors, which includes the lower level, 3rd floor, and 5th floor. Before February 28th, a mutually acceptable leaseback with JAPA must be executed, and legal counsel and myself are working on that, excuse me, that lease, which is now a MOU, and as well as Joel Crosby, the realtor involved. This MOU will be a leaseback for floors 1 and 4 only for our department. The lease term needs to run until our 2 new locations are move-in ready, and it needs to be at a rental rate that is reasonable and full service. Next slide, please. The plan schedule at this point in time is in February, Spokane County will enter into a mutually acceptable leaseback with JAPA. As of February 27th, again, we will have vacated all but 2 floors. That's floor 1 and floor 4 that we will continue to reside in. Spokane County will also execute leases for the 2 new locations for us to be able to relocate our department and our services. And currently the due diligence period for the sale is February 14th. We've heard word that that might change, but that's the current date. Others might have information that they can share as well on that. February 28th, again, is the planned closing date when ownership will transfer to the new buyer. Spokane County plans to have new leases signed and TI started. The plan and the hope is to have that done by the end of February. In June is the one of the locations for our CARES division, as well as all our directs, our staff that provide direct services to clients. So it's CARES division plus another 2 programs are currently planning and preparing to vacate the building in June. That is what the current lease that we're negotiating states, that the TIs will be completed. However, most standard leases have a delay period in there to accommodate the contractor should things be delayed. And that lease that we are currently negotiating does not have a delay period, but it's typically anywhere from 30 to 60 days. We have asked for that delay period to be included in the next lease update. If all the TAs are complete on June 1, then we would plan to move that group in from the 1st floor to that location, and then would vacate the 1st floor in June. In August, that is the time period on the lease that we are negotiating for that location for the TIs to be complete there. And they do have a delay period in the lease, which is 60 days at this point. Again, we are trying to negotiate that to 30 days, but at this point it is 60 days. And if all the TAs are complete, as soon as they are complete, that floor 4 would be vacated. And so that's anywhere between August 1st and October 1st, depending on the time period when the TAs are complete, that we would move in. So we are currently planning to move in August with hopes that they will have the TAs done by that date. Next slide, please. And actually, I'll take a pause on that last slide. I'm sorry. Jim, did you have anything further you wanted to add to that, if Jim Amacio is on?
I did not, Kathleen. My understanding, board members, is that Jaffa will be proposing an amendment to the potential due diligence date, which is presently set for June 14th, which is under the first block on the planned schedule. They want to change that possibly for another week or so. This would afford them the ability to have the lease with the Spokane Regional Health District executed by the new Board of Health. So we would expect to receive from Jaffa a change to the purchase and sale agreement for the building and the parking lot from February 14th to potentially February 26th, with the closing date still on February 28th.
Thank you, Jim. Next slide. So this slide just is.
Kathleen, can I just ask a question? And that still gives enough time for everything to close on the 28th. Is that correct?
Chairman, Chairman Cooney, we are working very diligent to have that take place, but what we are recommending to the board is that the leases for the 2 locations where Kathleen's departments are going to be relocated be executed actually before we close the transaction. And Kathleen and I, as she'll explain, have been working diligently on those. We expect to have those documents ready for the board's execution before the closing on February 28th. Additionally, as Kathleen pointed out, it is critical that the county have a lease with Jaffa for the 1st and 4th floors signed and in place before we close the transaction. But in answer to your question, Commissioner Cooney, Kathleen and I and Tony are working diligently to meet the time frame of February 28th.
Okay, thank you. And I think it is partially requesting that is due to the health district, since we don't have a board meeting until the 24th, so that way we can, as a board, approve that lease for the health district to move forward as well. So I think that's part of, as you explained, part of the timing is due to the board meeting for the health district.
And Chairman Cooney, in that regard, I would ask Mr. Crosby, who's listening, to prepare an addendum to the purchase and sale agreements, which recognize the due diligence date of February 25th, which would give, as Commissioner Cooney indicated, the new Spokane Regional Health District Board the opportunity to sign the agreement with Jaffa, and then the closing date would still be on the 28th. And Commissioner Cooney, you and the board members are already authorized to execute addendums to the purchase and sale agreement at other than an open meeting. So once Mr. Crosby prepares that document consistent with what I've just indicated, I will bring that to you for your and the other 2 board members' execution.
Thank you.
I'll have that for you shortly, and then we can get that to Jaffa for their execution as well.
Great. Thank you.
If there aren't any other questions or comments, we'll move to the slide that's currently up is the planned vacancy by floor. I know it's confusing because there are multiple floors and multiple dates. So Tony prepared this slide, which is a great illustration of the planned moves at this time. The lower level to be vacated on February 28th. The first floor to be vacated in June at the earliest, and potentially a 60-day window in there for that. The second floor to be vacant by April 30th by the Spokane Treatment and Recovery Services entities known as STARS, which is not a part of our department. The third floor will be vacant on February 28th. The fourth floor planned to be vacant in August or as late as October 1st, depending on the completion of the TIs. And then the fifth floor to be vacant on February 28th. Next slide.
I think
I'm sorry, go ahead.
the Jaffa would be, they would not want the fourth floor to be vacated as late as August. They would want that to be done. And hopefully the TIs could be done in that building on Cinto and make that be possible.
The current lease earliest date is August 1 with the Cinto lease.
That they're saying that's when the earliest they can have the TIs done?
Correct.
Okay,
And there's
well,
a 60-day delay period, making it October 1.
okay, that's, I mean, that won't be, the buyers won't like that. But we'll see, we'll have to talk with Craig and see if they can get the TIs done earlier than that.
Next slide, please. So the lease of space we're calling Space 1 is at 211 West Augusta. It is owned by the Haddon Settlement. It will house the Counseling and Recovery Services Division, the Diversion Program, and the Behavioral Health ASO Division's Ombud staff only, just the Ombud staff. So it's made up of 28 FTEs of our department. We just sent our third revision on behalf of Spokane County of the draft lease to the landlord's realtor as of yesterday, February 6th, with any issues, major issues we have. I think the biggest question on that lease currently is if there's a need for any kind of a delay period, and if not, to explicitly say there is no delay period needed. We don't know if it was left off or if there is no need for a delay period with that lease. So we are currently planning a move-in date for August 1st. The term duration of that lease is 10 years. It does have a paragraph for termination for convenience as well as termination for lost funding in it with various conditions around those. And the initial rate for the first year with this lease is $15 a square foot at a full service rate. The total square footage is 5,451. The tenant improvements in that are expected to take at least 4 months. There are some major renovations. This building was built in 1972, and at least I'm not a professional, but in my opinion, in going through it, it hasn't been updated significantly with regards to offices and things in a long time, if at all. And it is not ADA compliant. And so these are the major changes being made to it, is just to update things and to make it ADA compliant, not only on the outside of the building to ensure we can pass our Department of Health inspection, which is required for this space and the divisions moving into this space, but also on the inside, which means all the doorways and everything have to be opened up to be a certain distance and length in size in order for a wheelchair to pass through. So major renovations to this building at estimate of $335,000. We chose this building and location because it is in the city area where our clients are, yet it's a very safe and comfortable environment for both our staff and our clients, which is very important. We actually looked at a couple other sites and they were not as welcoming to the individuals that we serve. And so we felt this was the best and ideal location. We did look at a couple others and even started down a lease with another location, but it really turned out that this was the best match for this group. And so for these individuals that we serve, as well as the staff that will be located at this location.
Kathleen, you might mention to the board that in both the lease documents that Kathleen and I have located for this location and the following one, which you'll discuss, the tenant improvements, if you will, can be paid by the county up front, or it can be paid over the 10-year time frame of the initial term with a 6% interest on the outstanding tenant improvement costs. And so we can do it either way. It depends on funding sources for the tenant improvements. And Kathleen, please remind me, it's my understanding that the landlord is also making certain improvements on their own in the two locations, in addition to those which we're asking. So I don't want the board to be under the impression that the landlord isn't participating with certain improvements that they will make at their cost, which have to be in the structure before we move in. One final comment. The complication of these particular leases is different than any other leases because, as the board knows, the locations that Kathleen needs must be compliant with the Department of Health requirements. And those requirements are very detailed. And so that's why some of these improvements that we're talking about are more costly than what might otherwise be. So anyway, I just want to be sure the board understood that that we can pay these upfront or during the 10-year window, and that the landlord is participating to some degree in improvements in both structures.
And I
Thank you,
think
Jim. Go
I think
ahead.
to note is that the improvement costs would be amortized at a 6% interest rate by the landlord.
That is correct. And Jim is absolutely correct. I think Hutton settlement is actually at one point stated that over 70, initially when the cost was even a little bit lower in the estimate provided, was covering a significant amount of owner costs as well too. It was $75,000 at that point. It may even be higher now that they've increased the estimate. And again, they're trying to do this in such a way that it does not only meet ADA compliance, but all of Department of Health's requirements. This location is licensed with it would have to be, I'm sorry, I should say that again. The CARES division must be licensed with the Department of Health, and we have to submit an application. It takes about eight weeks to a minimum to get through that process, not only applying, but also a walkthrough and approval of the building once it is complete. I'm confident we can reach that and there won't be any issues, but that is why this specific site is so important to make sure that we have full ADA compliance, both inside and outside.
Board members, one further item. We did some work on this, and both landlords have to comply with prevailing wages in conjunction with all tenant improvements. And we actually got a reading from the state of Washington Department of Labor on this topic, which of course can increase the cost of certain improvements. And then finally, I wanted to mention the reason why the move-in date is so critical to Kathleen is, of course, and moving out of the 4th Avenue building, is that it's been our experience in talking with Mr. Hall that because of the COVID and other delays, you can't count on the potential occupancy date as being certain. And because of that, both landlords are trying to put language in their leases that give them some flexibility. And of course, although they want flexibility, Jaffa doesn't want flexibility. They want certainty. So it's because of that issue that the negotiation of the leases for this space, the Hutton space, if you will, and the Cinto space, which we'll be talking about, are so complicated. We're trying to address Jaffa's needs with the health district, with Kathleen's needs with her departments to relocate from the 8th Avenue building.
And I think in conjunction with that, Jaffa, the buyer, is wanting rents that would compensate them because if there is a delay, because then they're delayed in the rents they can charge to the health district, et cetera. So it's costly for them. The delays are costly for them, and the delays are troubling to the health district, who wants to get access to the building as soon as possible.
At the present time, board members, the county has agreed to pay Jaffa for the first 3 months the M&O costs associated with the 1st and 4th floors, which is approximately $19,000 a month. Beyond that time frame, Jaffa has indicated that they want us to pay double that amount of money if we have to occupy the space beyond 3 months. And of course, we're still negotiating that, and we're going to get further direction from Mr. Simmons on what a movement, if any, he wants to make in that respect.
And I think it is the point of the, I work at both sides of it, but it's the point of the buyer that as they're delayed, it delays their major client, the health district, from moving in. It delays them from being able to collect rents from the health district, and it's costly to them. So they want to rent like probably $35,000 in June and $40,000 in August if it has to go that late. That's my estimation of what they want. So that's a discussion that we have to have with the buyer to establish a rent that is acceptable and isn't too costly to them, but at the same time is acceptable to the county.
I apologize, Kathleen. Maybe we can move forward to the next location for the board to better understand.
Certainly. And before we move to the next slide, also with this property is non-exclusive use of parking. And it is, I think I said it's a full service lease. So these are some of the pieces that we were really looking for, especially for our clientele to be able to park. So there is parking around it as well as on the street without charge. So it really is an ideal location for this group. And really, very quickly, there weren't a lot of locations that didn't require a full build out. And so while this one does have TIs, it probably isn't as great as a full build out for this size compared to the next one that you'll see. Next
and
slide,
you'll
please.
notice, and board members, you'll notice, and Commissioner French, all the board members will be interested, we're paying this $15 per square foot, that's full service. And when Kathleen gets to the next one, it's triple net, but we're still paying about $15 and I think 23 cents per square foot. But remember, board members, in addition to this amount of money, we'll be paying the amortized cost of the tenant improvements in a lump sum up front over the 10-year window. So that may increase, as I say, the monthly fee that Kathleen's departments will be paying for the space.
So next slide, please.
Just to let you know, the $15 a foot is commensurate with the market. We've looked at other market rents and market leases, and several other locations actually would charge us more.
That's correct. And in fact, the first location, most of the city of Spokane that is available, but is also full build out, is around 20 to 21 per square foot. So for full service. So this is, again, this is really an ideal location for that group. And with the next slide of space 2, this part of the reason we look to the Valley is because their lease rates are lower than City of Spokane. So that's why we went to this location. So with regards to this space, it's at 9317 East Cinto Avenue, Spokane Valley, owned by the Patterson Family 2000 Trust. This location will house the remainder of our ASO division staff, which is a fairly large group, as well as our Housing and Community Development Division, who also does homelessness support of those programs, the Developmental Disabilities Division, and then all of our information systems, fiscal, and contract teams, as well as all administration staff. And so it's a total of 40 FTEs that would be assigned to this location. Unlike the last location, this location, majority of the individuals do telework. While in the last location, they can telework, that's only on a temporary basis at this point in time because of the pandemic. So the first space will have individuals being treated in person, which we currently do have also going on at our first floor of our 8th Avenue building. So with regards to this space and those individuals, the current status is the county responded to the initial draft that we received of the lease from the landlord and sent our response back yesterday, February 6th. We did review and finalize an architectural floor plan. This is a full build out. This means there's nothing there but the walls and structure, and so it will be a full build out. One of the advantages of a full build out is you can get it smaller to only what we need. That was our hope anyway. It's pretty much that way. But we had to, when they initially brought us the architectural floor plan, it was only for around 4,000 to 4,200 square feet, which would have been great. But unfortunately, the landlord would not lease us that small of a space and required it to be at least 5,000 square feet. So that's why we had to redo our diagram, which was completed on January 20th. This again has a move-in date as late, worst case scenario, as October 1. But ideally, if they can complete it by August 1 or even earlier, we would be prepared to move in earlier as soon as it's available. The term duration for this lease is also 10 years. The initial rate per square foot is $12 a square foot. But again, as Jim said, it's a triple net lease, and so it has an additional $3.25 square foot charge to it, and that does not include janitorial services within the suite. And the total square footage is 5,014, as quoted by their architect to me. The tenant improvements, they're saying a full build out will take at least 5 months, and the estimated cost for the full build out of the square footage is $350,000, and that it is an estimate at this point in time, and that it has not been provided to us specifically by the landlord or the landlord's contractor. That has been provided to us verbally at this point in time through our realtor. I don't know, Joel, if you have anything further to add regarding that estimate or not.
No, I haven't. I have to check with Craig and find. He was getting a contractor to do this, and once he gets a contractor, he'll have more specific numbers and a time. Hopefully, they could move in much sooner than August 1.
Okay. Any questions on that or anything more to add, Jim or Joel, on this slide?
I'm fine, Kathleen.
Okay, next slide, please.
I just want to make a comment about the working with your staff people, Tony Hall, Kathleen Torella, and Jim Amacio. In my view, they've done a fantastic job. They put in hundreds of hours of additional time negotiating these leases, doing all the things that they've needed to do, and they've been a pleasure to work with. And I think you can be very grateful and proud of the work that they do. They do a tremendous job. And Jim is a tenacious defender of the county, and Kathleen is great in terms of working with these things. And she spent hours and hours going over these leases, et cetera. And Tony's done a great job supervising it. So I think they've done a great amount of work to make this huge, complicated project come to fruition.
Thank you, Joel. The next slide that I specifically wanted to present to the commissioners, which has been talked to a little bit about, is with regards to the tenant improvements. Again, that's just a rough approximation of at $700,000. We know it's at least going to be between $650,000 and $700,000 for the 2 locations, as you've been provided in the previous slides. So it's how to cover the cost of the tenant improvements. And option 1 would be if Spokane County was willing to, from the proceeds of the sale of the building, be willing to cover the tenant improvements 100%. Option 2, if Spokane County, likewise from the proceeds of the sale or other available funding, would pay a certain percentage of the improvements. Or option 3, the Spokane County General pay 0 on the improvements, and that our department fund the entire balance with our reserve funds. As has been said, there's also an alternative that we could fund the TIs over the term of the lease at a 6% interest rate that would be amortized over the life of the 10-year term of the lease. And I just wanted to speak to a couple of remarks in regards to this, and it's because our department to date has never, or at least as long as I've been a part of it, has never asked for any funding from the general fund or in any way in that regard, and would never even consider it. The reason that I am considering it and I'm respectfully making this request is to remind the commissioners that the 8th Avenue building was bought in January 27, 2004 for $3.65 million, and it was paid for out of our mental health administrative funds from state contracts. And this was funding where we're always very frugal and careful, and it was saved up for many years by my predecessors to have that accumulation of funds to pay the purchase price at that time of $3.65 million. Additionally, on February 19, 2020, the board approved a resolution to transfer the asset from our department to the general fund, and that was occurred on December 31st, 2020. So over the 17-year period of time that we held it in our department, we also paid for all of the operational costs and capital improvement projects for the building. In addition, on December 31st, when it was transferred from our department to the general fund, we also transferred over $559,000 in maintenance and operations funding to go with the building, which is well over 2.5 times what it cost for the building. And with the sale of this building, it will have only been maintained by the general fund county component for 15 months. So part of the reasons for that is I just wanted to recognize for the commissioners the funding that has been utilized for this, for the consideration of the tenant improvements. We do have reserves to cover this, which I'm sure is your first question, and we would want to pay the funding upfront because, again, we're very frugal, we're very careful. We would not want to use our public funds for another 6% interest. We do have the funds, we have it now, and so we would want to use it upfront versus pay it over time. And I think the only real concern is with regards to using the reserves is really for our Housing and Community Development Division, and that is because they only have $200,000 in reserves. We always try to hold to that level. They have the lowest amount of reserves of all of our divisions. It's just the way they're designed because of how little admin that division gets in its contracts. And so their percentage is about 24%, and they would be in the Cinto location. And so their TIs would run approximately, again, about $84,000, and moving costs, another probably $15,000. So I estimate for our housing community development, it's probably going to take 50% of their reserves to do that, and then we would be down to 100,000 in reserves. So from a reserve standpoint, that's the situation. The rest of the others can take and cover the reserves. It, of course, as a department, makes us concerned and even more careful, but we can fund the reserves if that is what the commissioners decide in this matter. So I think that completes my remarks, unless there's any other questions or comments from panelists or the commissioners.
And so, Commissioner Cooney, this is our presentation this morning. I want to remind the board of 3 things as we move forward. Number 1, we're expecting Mr. Crosby to present an addendum to the purchase and sale agreement for both pieces of property, which would change the due diligence date to, I think, February 24th or 25th, I believe, which would accommodate the Regional Health District. Number 2, the closing.
25th is what I think. The 24th is the board meeting for the health district.
That's fine, Commissioner. We'll change it to the 25th. And number 2, we would presently leave the closing date at February 28th. Number 2, we want to be able to look to Mr. Simmons with respect to the rent that the county will pay beyond May 31st, 2022. You've heard Mr. Crosby indicate that Jaffa wants to substantially increase the rent from $19,000 plus per month beyond the May 31st date. And the reason they want to do that is because, as Mr. Crosby points out, they're losing rent if we stay in there which would be paid by the regional health district. And so I think that's what I'm hearing Mr. Crosby say. And as I say, Kathleen and I will look to Mr. Simmons for further direction in that regard. And then the third issue is, as Kathleen has indicated, as we move forward to execute the leases for the two space, she will want direction from the board and or Mr. Simmons as to whether or not there'll be any financial participation from the board in the tenant improvements as she has outlined. So Commissioner CUNY, that's our presentation. And if the board doesn't have any further comments, we'll move forward as I just recommended.
Hey, Scott, I see you've raised your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer some additional information on the close date. If the board will recall, when we originally when you originally executed the PSA with Jaffa, the initial close period was the end of April. The due diligence to the feasibility period was through sometime, I think, in December. Then those two dates subsequently got amended out into middle of January for the feasibility study, then subsequently again to the middle of February. And the close date got moved to the end of May. So this actually reflects an accelerated close period. So it reflects what the team's been working together to try to find a way to get Jaffa to be able to get in there and start doing some tenant improvements for their prospective tenants. So those are it is about 3 months earlier than the purchase and sale agreement does call for today with the close period.
I think actually the initial closing date was December 31st of 2021, and then it got moved because of delays, etc.
That I don't think that was ever in the purchase and sale agreement that was signed by the board.
Oh, okay.
I think it was our understanding, though, originally, Scott, that they were trying to get it done by the end of the year for tax purposes and all of that. So I do recall that as being, kind of a target. So for
Right. And I think they sort of relented on that in terms of working with the health district and the board and the county, et cetera.
Yeah. And I know that, from the health district is trying to get into that building as soon as possible. They've been looking for a long time. And this is, kind of where we're at. So, so yes, the sooner that we can make it happen for everybody, I think the better. So I don't know, Kathleen, I mean, this is the first time we're talking about, what the TIs are where that TI cost is gonna come from. So, I mean, I would guess I would ask Gary to kind of put together what does that mean in the different scenarios? To come back to us, to have us, look at that again and make a decision on that, since this is just the first time we're hearing and thinking through that. I don't know if my other two commissioners have any thoughts. Seeing nobody come off mute or put their videos on, I will say thank you. I see Commissioner French.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I mean, at 6% cost, we can probably do better than that by funding it ourselves and stuff. So, but, certainly would like to hear staff's opinion if it's different than that.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you all. I know this has been a process to try to get us through here. And again, just so people know, I am on the board of Hutton Sullivan, so I will be recusing myself from that vote as that comes forward. I was not at our last board meeting, so because I'm trying to recuse myself on that side as well. So I do not know what their discussions were at this point in time, but I think, it sounds like the building's a great spot. Both the locations that you've been working hard to try to figure out. So I just want to thank you for all the hard work that everybody's put in, because I know it's been a process. So I appreciate it, and thank you for presenting today.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is Chad Coles and Matt Zarakor that are going to provide a briefing on right-of-way vacations, road name changes for Barker Road, and no parking traffic code public hearings is going to be canceled. So I'll let Chad I see both Chad and Matt have joined us, so I'll let Chad or Matt, I'm not sure who's going to take the lead on this.
I will take the lead to abruptly hand it off to Matt.
Good.
Good morning, Commissioners. Matt Zarakor here. Just have a couple of vacations we were hoping to brief you on, not the fun kind, someplace tropical, but getting rid of roads, which is often a welcome thing. So the first one we have is Baker Road. Next slide, please.
Oh, thank you. I think I misspoke and said Barker Road, so Baker Road.
Oh, we're talking about Barker too, so that's all good.
Okay.
So this is where it sits in the world. You can see it south of Elder Road, kind of in the southeast county and west of Highway 27. Next slide, please. And there's two ownerships that front on this portion of Baker Road. Baker Road's basically a two-track road out through some fields. The two owners have both signed the petition for the vacation and have access to their properties because they own both the parcels up front. So this one, we don't see a future need for it. Cameron Road is about a half a mile to the south and provides an east-west connection. And Highway 27 kind of bends to the west, not too far north of this. So there's a couple different routes for folks to get east-west. We don't see a future need for this connection. And Marsh Road will provide access to the existing homestead there. And that's all I have on that one. Next slide, please. The next one we're going to talk about is Chris Court. Next slide. And this one is up in northern Spokane County, actually just north of the urban area. You can see just on the north side of Highway 206, Mount Spokane Park Drive, and east of Highway 2 there. And Lloyd Torgeson is the petitioner and the developer in that area. He owns all the lots that front on this portion of Chris Court that he's asking to have vacated. And on his petition, he also had all the other parcel owners really to the east of the vacation sign it also. So we have their concurrence also, even though the vacation doesn't directly affect them, it does change their access a little, but they were all in favor of it. Next slide. This is just a zoomed in portion of it. You can see that we have about 1,000 feet of roadway, about 600 feet of it is being vacated on the east-west portion. And then the 300-foot approximately connection down to Mount Spokane Park Drive is also being vacated. And really, this is a first step by the developer to make way for future commercial development. Yeah, Commissioner French.
Well, maybe you just answered my question. I was wondering, does he control all the lots then, fronting on the Chris Court?
He does, yes.
So he's trying to consolidate, and I assume at some point we'll have a BLA and aggregation of all the lots into a single lot then?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. I believe he plans on doing a commercial binding site plan and developing this along with the property to the north into a larger commercial development, which obviously will have all of its own internal access as part of the binding site plan process.
Okay, thank you. I want to just make sure I fully understood it.
Yeah. And the existing roadway is just 22 feet wide. It's a gravel roadway. And obviously it's redundant to Highway 206 directly to the south, so it's not needed for access. And as we just mentioned, they will develop access internally through the commercial binding site plan process when they develop their property. And that's all I have on that one. Are there any questions on either of the vacations? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is the road name change for Barker Road to Rodeo Drive. Next slide. You can see where this is out off of Barker, South Valley, down to 32nd. Next slide, please. And what is driving this? The landowner to kind of to the south and to the east of Barker Road, where it's shown in red, is Bud Morrison, and he's completed a road improvement as part of his development. which straightened Barker. If you start, and I apologize, I tried to find a better map, but the road's so new it doesn't show on any of the aerials. But if you start up there at the northeast end where the red line starts, the new road continues south, eventually bending to the west and connecting in at Barker and 32nd. It's a nice new arterial. It's a very good and welcome improvement for Barker Road. Instead of people having to make those two 90-degree turns and then stopping where Barker now connects to 32nd, they just have one straight, wide, and open and smooth transition down into 32nd. So that's a nice improvement for the South Valley folks that are coming into town. But it does necessitate a road name change for the old portion of Barker Road, shown in red here. And the frontage along the west or east side of Barker, where it's shown here in red, those have been developed into lots. And we came back and talked to you folks back in September 7th, and briefed you on this. Since then, we've gone out with a letter to all the homeowners and solicited their input. We had worked through emergency services through Joe Sacco with Shrek and had a couple of options for them and let them choose which one they liked. There was a lot of input. Folks were interested. A lot of them would have liked to have kept Barker Road, but as you might imagine, we kind of have the need to keep Barker Road the same road name since it's a continuous smooth alignment now. And the two options they were presented with were virtually evenly split, unfortunately, but the winning one was Rodeo Drive. So that's the one we're moving forward with. The homeowners have been notified of that. I didn't get too much additional comment after I let them know that Rodeo Drive was being selected, but there was quite a bit of input, quite a bit of written and also phone calls coming back regarding the road name change. And I think at this point, they all just want it changed because it's getting confusing with the new alignment built and in place. People just want their packages to come to the right spot, and we want emergency services to go to the right spot. Commissioner French, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I want to make sure I understood when you said that the current road, Barker, instead of turning to the west and then to the south, will extend straight south, almost as though there's that dirt road there that's actually a property line. At what point does it come back into 32nd at?
Yeah, that's exactly right. If you follow that light line, that was kind of an old farm road that follows that property line. It goes directly south, almost to that shop building that you can see there in the aerial. And then it bends to the west in a large radius and ties in right where the old alignment of Barker hit 32nd. And then the last piece of 32nd was realigned to come in at a T intersection. So it very much made this new alignment of Barker the thoroughfare. It's a really nice alignment and nice roadway. The contractor did a really good job out there. I encourage you, if you ever get down in that neck of the woods, to drive it and take a look at it. It was a nice improvement paid for by developer funds, which is always a welcome thing too.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So, and Matt, I guess I just have some questions, just because, I got a lot of comments from people when you proposed this back in September. So you have reached out and talked to them, and everybody, I guess you were saying they were split on there was two names, and they were split on which one, but this was the one that was chosen.
Yeah, that's correct. We had offered up two different names. Dawnwood Road was one of them that Shrek said they could live with, and the other one was Rodeo Drive. There's quite a bit of criteria when we rename roads that Shrek likes to follow for obvious reasons. They want to make sure that there's no confusion when people are being dispatched in an emergency. So we always go through them to come up with the road name selections. And when we forwarded them, there was strong opinions both ways, which is always a little unfortunate. It'd be nice to just get a consensus of happy people with the new road name, but this one had people in both courts and a lot of folks that really just wanted to keep it Barker Road initially, but we kind of worked through that with them, talking about the need to rename the road. So I think we have them all there, kind of reluctant passengers on the road renaming, but they understand the need to rename it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just a lot of them, they've been their address for a long time. So
Right.
hard to then go changing all your, change your address with everybody when you haven't moved and everyone's like confused. So no, I understand that, but so it's really for a public safety Shrek perspective for that the need for the renaming and so then they help drive the name. Is that correct? Just so I know if I get calls.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're, the obvious alignment of Barker is the one continuing to the south, the new alignment, and that facilitated the need to change the road name. And as you alluded to, I mean, who wants to have the road name changed, right? You think of all the ramifications for changing the road name from the bills you get every month to your friends and family's Christmas cards, and it's an undertaking to get that all redone. But everybody understood the need and eventually felt like they were more or less on board. I guess we'll find out at the public hearing, but we reached out to them and we did try and talk to them all as much as possible about the change. And I believe they understood at the end.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I have to brief you on. There was one other item I just wanted to make the board aware of, and the chair in particular. We had a public hearing scheduled for tomorrow for Park Bench Road to add no parking signs. This is a small road above the west side of Newman Lake, and it gets pretty congested on certain, usually weekends in the summertime. And the fire department out there had requested that we install no parking signs. When we posted it for the public hearing that we were going to put in no parking signs, we received a significant amount of public feedback. I would say probably the majority of the folks out there wrote in, and Gina can attest to the tone of the letters was they do not want their parking taken away. And so we reached back out to the fire department and requested that we all get together and talk to the neighborhood about what options might be available. I think a limited amount of no parking in certain areas might be okay, but we'll definitely want to work that through the neighborhood. And we're kind of trying to put the fire department on point for that effort because they're the ones driving the initial request. So we would like to cancel that public hearing for tomorrow. And once we get through the process with the fire department and the neighborhood, we'll reach back out and schedule a public hearing if it's decided that no parking is needed in that portion of the roadway.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate you letting us know.
Thank you.
Make a note of that tomorrow.
That's all I got.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And so we are now kind of off on our schedule with timing. So with that, we are going to move Mike Burgess to 10:15 for a legislative update. And we are going to move forward with Scott Chesney and Jessica Pilgrim to talk about a comp plan amendment briefing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, Scott, good to be before you on a Monday morning. We have a pretty straightforward request today, and it relates to having the board delegate authority to the Planning Commission, very similar to what it does on a normal basis, but to do so specifically to receive and solicit comment on the current round of comprehensive plan amendments that were submitted up to December of 21. In the past, those applications were taken typically to the end of the year, sometimes a little bit past that, sorted through by staff and then simply presented to the board up front in more of a raw state for your consideration as to be initiated and referred back for detailed examination. As part of our settlement agreement with FutureWise and others, and as part of our updated public participation guidelines anticipating where we're going all the way through 26 in the comp plan, we're exploring a little, expanding our public participation for these comp plan amendments up front. And what we would be doing is having the Planning Commission hold a public workshop, and distinct from a public hearing. There's no formal testimony, but these would be presented essentially as they came in and soliciting ideas from the public at an early stage. Correspondingly, we have also held a handful of meetings with various agencies, Spokane Transit, the City of Spokane, and a couple others. We've got one coming up with DOT that we're doing via Zoom that we can go through these amendments in a more casual fashion, but also in a more detailed approach, rather than waiting until the end and submitting a formal report and asking for formal comments. We see the advantage of this as certainly finding any major issues up front that we can deal with and present to you when we come back for initiation sometime later this spring. So we think having this extra comment period is a really useful way of bringing these into the system. We recognize it's new, and so in the abundance of caution, we are asking for a specific resolution that would come to you next week for action on the 15th, I believe, that would delegate that authority to the Planning Commission to undertake this information gathering request. And I'll ask Jessica if she has any other issues from the legal side.
And I think the only other thing that we were hoping for on direction from the board today is whether the board would like that resolution to include just the Planning Commission taking public comment and summarizing that for the board when it considers the initiation, or whether the board would prefer that the Planning Commission also issue a recommendation as to whether the board should initiate those. So if we could get direction from the board today on whether you want the Planning Commission to also give a recommendation, that would be handy for us including in our resolution for next week.
Any comments from my other two commissioners? I guess for me, I would say if they're going to be taking the initial public comment, I would prefer for them to also provide a recommendation since they're hearing that directly. But that's my thought. Commissioner French, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd like to hear what the recommendation is out of the Planning Commission as part of that process.
Commissioner Kearns, head nod.
Yeah, no, I agree with you both.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you, commissioners. We will create that resolution accordingly, and you'll see it next week.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And then I think you had something else that we're going to delay until tomorrow or next week. Do you know?
Yes, we are presuming that we will be ready to bring that additional item to you at the end of your 2 o'clock meeting tomorrow.
Okay, very good. I'll add that. Probably after, I would say, Scott, after the 2:15 ARP planning discussion, then we have another executive session, so maybe we'll do both at that time. So after that.
Got it. Understood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so suddenly now we're ahead of schedule. Again, Mike Burgess is not going to be able to join us when we had to delay him until 10:15. So I will see, maybe Scott, we can go through some miscellaneous items for 15 minutes.
We can. Thank you, Commissioner. We've got 2 items. One is there is a change to our intergovernmental support agreement with the Air Force that Jim Amacio has drafted up. It essentially recognizes that Jerry Gimmel, who was CEO at the time and executed some of the documents, is still named on the agreement. So it would replace him, put my name on that, and allow any of the kind of underlying agreements that are more kind of not board level actions needed. So that is a letter that you have. I believe Gene will have for you for the 3 commissioners assigned to delegate that or to make the change in it. Any questions on that or?
Do we need a motion to do that?
Probably would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, so move to do everything Scott just said.
Perfect.
I will second the motion.
So we have
I will second the motion authorizing the signature of a letter designating Scott Simmons as the highest level employee of the county as the chief executive officer, and that he is stating that he has replaced Jerry Gimmel.
Okay.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Much more succinct than I said.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Scott, you can now sign those documents that you need to.
Okay, thank you. And we've got one more resolution for you all to consider. And this is previously Kevin Cook is the Environmental Services Director. The board had authorized for him to sign in his capacity various agreements, MOUs, and interlocals. Now that Kevin's retired and we've combined that organization with Public Works, we'd want to effect the same sort of action. So you have a resolution also in front of you to delegate authority to the, let's see, let me look at this. It's to delegate the Public Works Director the ability to sign such agreements, MOUs, and interlocal agreements.
Okay, and so that's
So
going to
moved.
be, well, it's a resolution that's on the 2 o'clock tomorrow.
It's on tomorrow, correct? I'm just briefing you in advance. My apologies, I
Okay,
didn't make that
never
clear on
mind.
the front end.
Never mind.
Thank you.
Motion dies for lack of a second.
Exactly. Okay.
Then did you want me to bring up the letter of support, Commissioner Cooney?
Yes, I do not have that in front of me, so.
So the, I'm trying to recollect, the Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Project has sent in a request for a letter of support. They are petitioning, if that's the right word, Department of Transportation to change the name of the Argonne Overpass at I-90 to recognize an individual who was hit and killed, a sheriff, Spokane County Sheriff deputy who was hit and killed back in 1961. So the letter I think each of you should have, but basically it's looking for just a letter of support in their petitioning of WashDOT to have that name change. And I can read the letter if you'd like. That'd be helpful.
Oh, that's all right. I found mine.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, I would move that we draft a letter to be signed in other than an open public meeting for the Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Project, which has the intent of changing the name for the Argonne Overpass and as I'd say as drafted and submitted, since it's already been drafted.
I'll second.
I have a motion and second to sign a letter and other than an open public meeting in support of the Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Project to request the renaming of the Argonne Road Overpass over I-90 in memory of Spokane County Sheriff's Deputy Joseph M. O'Connor. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
And that's all I had on under miscellaneous items, Commissioner Cuny.
You sure you don't have like 5 more minutes worth of stuff?
I'm sure we could probably fill it.
So, because we've got about 6 minutes before we get Mike Burgess on. So if there's anything else that anyone else wants to bring up under miscellaneous?
We could have Jared share how his trip was.
Yes.
Well, I'm not sunburnt, so that's a good situation.
It means you weren't out in the sun enough, Jared.
It means I've learned my lesson with sunblock. No real updates for me. Just catching up from being gone last week. I will probably have something after I sift through a lot of emails, though.
Should we go at ease for 5 minutes?
We can do that. We can go into a 5-minute break to give everybody a chance to refill their coffee or water. So we will take a break and come back at 10:15. Okay, it is 10:18. We are back from our 5-minute recess that extended a little bit, 3 more minutes. And we are joined, I see, by Mike Burgess. I thought I saw him. There he is. So Mike, thank you very much for being flexible with us as we were, our schedule had changed a little bit. And I know yours too. So thank you for joining us back. And you're going to discuss the 2022 legislative update.
Yes, commissioners. I think I can buzz through this pretty quick. There's not a lot new. It's updates from bills that we've talked about previously, but for a couple of issues that I wanted to bring up. One's kind of a holdover from last week. So the first, the salmon habitat bills, those are the ones that required the setbacks in the riparian areas. I think I'd let you know that they were both dead last week, but wanted to confirm that. There was still committee time when we had spoken. But neither of those bills has moved. So we will no longer be considering them this session. Having said that, though, I think it will be a certainty that there will be some language in the budget convening a work group to look at this issue. And it will include representatives from counties. So we'll coordinate that through WASAC. The next one, the organic materials management, that bill is being heard in appropriations as we speak this morning. It did pass its policy committee, so it's in appropriations because it has a fiscal cutoff. I did sign you all in opposition to that based on the position you took a few weeks ago. So we'll continue to manage, to pay attention to that bill and see where it goes. 1925, the civil infractions in the parks bill. That bill did die in committee.
Commissioner French raised his hand. So I just want to
Sorry
make
about
sure
that.
if it's regarding one of those that we get it in time. Go ahead.
A quick question for you, Mike, on the House Bill 1799. Is there a possibility to get an exemption for those counties that are using, incineration as waste treatment? Because I don't remember seeing anything in the bill when I read it that allowed for that kind of an exemption. But I mean, if we're incinerating everything, we don't really need to compost it or anything else.
You're correct, Commissioner, in that there's not an exemption in the bill now, and I can inquire about that depending on how the bill moves.
Well, it might be a way, if it does move, it might be a way to soften it up to where we're exempted out of it.
Sure. And assuming that's the desire of your commissioners as well. I see a nod from Commissioner Kearns, it looks like. Okay. I will take that as a yes. On the civil infractions rules, regulations, so it's interesting. The bill was scheduled for exec. It didn't come up, came off of an agenda, was added back on, and then ultimately did not come up. Some of the backstory I've heard is there was question in the majority party about a county's ability to ticket folks that might be homeless, and that somehow this bill would be applied to that. Needless to say, I know that's not your intention, but from a time constraint standpoint, we didn't have the time to educate members that that's not what this was about. So frankly, it's just something we're going to have to address next session. I've looked for other vehicles to amend this bill onto. There are not any available at this time. I'll continue to look for those, but just wanted to let you know that we likely won't see any more action on that the rest of the session. 1918, the reducing emissions from power equipment. I mentioned last week that bill had been referred to finance because of the tax implications. It still has yet to be scheduled for a hearing. You could make the argument that this bill is necessary to implement the budget because it does have that fiscal component to it, the revenue aspect of it, but not sure that would really rise to that level. We'll have to wait and see. I'll keep my eye on it, but at this point, I'm encouraged that it has not gotten a hearing scheduled. I would have thought if it were going to move, it would have had that yet. But again, we'll continue to pay attention to that. The broadband development bill, this is the micro-trenching legislation we've spoken about 3 times. It did not pass from the policy committee. So that will come off the list. And I should have mentioned to you, I'm just going to remove a bunch of these from the list that are dead as we go forward. The economic development tax deferral is waiting action in the Senate. Also a bill that is necessary to implement the budget because it does have revenue implications. So it hasn't moved. It moved from the policy committee, has not had a hearing in Ways and Means. But given that it's a Senate bill, I'm not discouraged by that. That's relatively normal for a bill like this to stay in Ways and Means. But what we will look for is to see if it's assumed in the Senate's budget, which will be released not this week, but probably next week or the week after. So that'll give us an idea if it's one that they would assume to build their budget. The leasing certain DOT properties legislation, 5853, being voted from transportation today. I think their hearing starts at noon. It does have an amendment that doesn't impact it does not impact the policy of the bill. It's got some clarifying language in it, intent for DOT and some things like that. Commissioner French, looks like you have a question.
Well, and so this is an issue that's very important to the East Central neighborhood, and
Right.
and I think all 3 of us have had conversations with them and stuff. So have we taken a position on this in the past yet, or
You did last week in support.
in support? Okay, thank you.
Yep, you got it. The next bill is the one that I think we'll probably need to take some time on and strategize on a bit. This is 5867, dealing with homelessness. If we could bring up the bill, I think it's easier to read, honestly, than, well, actually, excuse me. Brent, well, if we can bring up the bill report, it's the second of the 2 links there. The link on the bottom, and then just go to the brief description of the bill that's on the first page. This is something I sent back to Jeff last week that's kind of popped up. The bill was introduced, but was permissive. And you can see the requirements there for the county, what you would have to do, especially there in the second and third and fourth bullet points. The first is just the population requirement that you would have at least 1 emergency overnight shelter. You can see there what the other requirements in the bill would be. Certainly, there's a cost component issue to this and an unfunded mandate issue associated with it. I would assume, though, that the county's already doing some of these things, just maybe not in the manner that the bill lays them out to be. I think by mandating the services that are in this bill, by my understanding and my read, it would result potentially in a shift of services. Again, mentioning those services that you're already providing. There were a lot of investments made in the legislature in the last 3 years, that I'm sure that you're still implementing. I know you're probably dealing with housing, maybe some contracts. I've heard this from other counties. So you all haven't had the time to implement things that the legislature has already passed. Another note on this, the governor's budget proposal did include $800 million, but that $800 million for housing, most of it, if not all of it's already spoken for. It's directed into different areas. And so this legislation doesn't take into account, there's just been some verbiage out there in the legislature that, well, the governor put a bunch of money into this and you could just use some of those funds. Well, those funds are spoken for, first of all. And secondly, those aren't the Senate or House's proposals yet, which we have not seen. So I wanted to throw those anecdotes out. Commissioner French, you spoke against this at WASAC. So I guess what I'm looking for is the direction from you all, and then then we'll talk maybe about the strategy going forward.
So if you don't mind, I'll share with my fellow commissioners my observations from last Friday and part of the conversation. You'll notice in that first bullet point, it requires counties and cities with a population of more than 50,000 to establish one emergency overnight shelter. It does not differentiate whether that shelter can be located inside a city or has to be in the unincorporated area as far as Spokane is concerned. So despite the fact that we have shelters inside the city of Spokane, and Spokane Valley is looking at creating a shelter, this would require that we have a separate shelter outside. The other part of it that's really problematic is that it also requires that we have social service programs with each one of these shelters. So everything we've invested in with regard to the resource center downtown would have to duplicate in the unincorporated area if in fact we were going to be required to put a shelter in the unincorporated area and stuff. And so as I saw it, and as we discussed it on Friday, there's still a lot of unknowns about, what counties would and would not have to do and what they could take credit for in terms of what's already in place. So there are concerns, not only the concerns that I've voiced, but other counties as well.
Okay, thank you. Because this just came up. I mean, we haven't seen this bill before, correct, Mike?
No, it was introduced weeks ago, Commissioner, but it was permissive. It didn't become a requirement until recently. It was amended. And so that's why the issue was raised, and that's why there's more attention to it now.
Okay.
Yeah, the requirement just surfaced last week.
Right.
And so as we talked about it at the LSC, it was reaction to a bill that just kind of popped up that had some significant impacts for counties.
And I think, Commissioner, your point is well taken that, and I think I mentioned that it could result in a shift of services, that as a community and as commissioners, you've already set in place a number of programs that deal with a lot of the things this bill's talking about, in terms of, you mentioned I think you called it a services center. I didn't make note of the verb.
Resource center.
Your resource center. I mean, in some ways, because of the resources that you're limited to, the net result could be that you'd have to shut that down and shift those services to another location. You mentioned that it's unclear about, are you going to get credit for the work you're already doing? I had that same conversation with one of my colleagues this morning, that maybe there's a way to work on this bill to give counties that are already doing a lot of this work acknowledgement of that, and not force them to do a duplicative program. Don't know yet that that's where things will end up. I think what I need, and I know Jeff, I see him there, but it sounds like he's going to have to jump off here, or maybe he's already. But I can work with Jeff, but I need to get a better accounting of what you're doing that is similar to what this bill asks for. And then, if it's possible, how much would it cost if you just had to do what the bill said? So let's just say you kept doing what you're doing now, and what would be the additive cost for that? And I don't know how easily that cost number is to come up with. I know that's probably really hard. But
Actually, Mike, I don't think it's going to be as hard as you think. Because we've been looking at that, to see how much money we're putting into homelessness. I think we just put out the contracts for the next year cycle. So we know, what we're giving to Volunteers America, what we're giving to Catholic Charities, all of those. So Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we can pretty easily get that information. And then we can also look at the grants that then we get, that then we give, take those grants and we give those to the city, again, to help with the homelessness, because we've done it as a coordinated effort, is what we've done here at Spokane County, because a lot of the services are downtown. And that's kind of what the policies have been, that's been the coordinated effort in the past. Commissioner French?
Yeah, so as I understand the bill as it's currently written, if you were to take the resource center and the budget for each one of the social service agencies that's inside the resource center, and then what we pay to support it, add that all up, and then duplicate it for the unincorporated area. I mean, you're going to be in the millions of dollars to pay for all of the services that we would have to duplicate. And that's the impact. And then you take and do that same thing over again and put it in Spokane Valley. So the cost to the community is going to triple over what we have now to be able to support homelessness as this bill is currently written.
Okay. I'm glad that's easier than I thought. So that's good. So we can get me some of that information, and I'll get an accounting of what I want to Jeff, and then we'll probably work this up into an email message. Maybe we'll turn it into a letter. I don't know yet. But Commissioner, the next step to this too would be, as I understand it, you as the county may not provide all these services, but you contract with nonprofits that do. Do I have that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. If I were those nonprofits and I saw this, I would be concerned because, as you just said, what you're doing now costs this much. To do it again is this much. You don't get this many more resources from the state. Your next move would be to have to shift those services. So in my mind, and I might be making a leap, but the bill might jeopardize the services that are currently being provided by your nonprofit partners. And if you think that's an unfair leap, please tell me, but I'm just logically, I think that could happen.
No, I think that's a fair statement.
Okay.
And the other part of it is, for the county, if we're going to be forced to move all of these services to the unincorporated area, that means that the city of Spokane will not have those services inside the city. So they're going to have to pay more to be able to replace the services that you just took to the unincorporated Spokane County. So as a community, we've tripled our costs. Now, we're going to take it out of different people's buckets, but as a community, we've tripled our cost.
Okay. A good thing would be if these folks were to communicate, and when I say these folks, these nonprofits or these other entities that you're dealing with, were to do some outreach to your delegation members in Spokane, in particular on the Senate side to start with. It's a Senate bill right now. But I can tell you that a lot of the housing advocate groups like this bill. You know that housing has been a big issue in Olympia the last handful of years. And when I say housing, I mean homelessness, excuse me. But a lot of the advocate groups like this bill. There is a perception amongst those groups that counties are not getting out the services that the legislature's passed fast enough in the assistance for housing and things like that over the last few sessions that have passed. I'm not arguing that point. I'm just saying that there's this perception out there, and that's where maybe some of this is coming from. But I don't know if those advocates, especially at your local level, understand the chain reaction of events that Commissioner French did describe as to what could happen. So I'll talk to Jeff further about maybe some outreach there that maybe you all might need to do or would be good to do to those community partners over the next handful of days. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And Commissioner French, go ahead.
Yeah, it does. And to support your speculation, Mike, just saw a flyer this morning from Pierce County where they were boasting about the fact that their staff was able to get, I think it was $58,000 in rental assistance, utility assistance out for 2021. And when you look at Spokane County, we just got a report here a couple of weeks ago, and we put out almost 25 million in that same period of time and stuff. And so the agencies would justifiably be upset with, like Pierce County, because it is dragging its feet to get that money out in the community. The other thing is that if we have to triple the locations, but we're working on the same amount of money, the amount of services that are actually going to be available for the constituents that they're trying to service is going to be less, not more, less. Because we're not going to spend more money on it. We're going to spend the same amount of money we're spending now. We're just going to divide it up into 3 locations.
Okay.
As you go into the different locations, then too, Mike, I mean, the workforce shortage that we already have. So, I mean, that's going to be a whole nother factor that, we can't staff, it's hard to staff what these nonprofits already have and have going to then try to do other locations is going to be almost impossible.
Gotcha. Okay, so, I mean, obviously based on this discussion, you all oppose the bill in its current form. Okay, and then I'll work up what I need from Jeff and check in with him later today, and then get the idea of some of those numbers, maybe write up some points to kind of summarize the things we've talked about this bill, some of the unintended consequences, and then I'll talk with him too about outreach to other groups in your community that could do outreach to the members of our delegation or your delegation here in Olympia.
Scott, I see you raise your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what you said earlier, Commissioner CUNY. We do have information that can show where we're providing support today. You mentioned VOA, Catholic Charities, Salvation Army, a variety of areas right now that we're providing for the support. A lot of that is inside the city, but it's through county funds. I think there's some other challenge in the bill too, because it talks about point-in-time counts, and I don't have the real specific about how it's done, but it's generally done on a collaborative county-wide basis with all of the jurisdictions involved. And so if this gets very surgical and dictating that it has to be determined on an individual jurisdiction's point-in-time count, I'm not sure how that can effectively be done to even determine what kind of housing or shelters need to be in the unincorporated areas. But I think what Commissioner French raises as just an estimate, I think that's a pretty fair assessment of it's going to be much more expensive than what it is today.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I've heard that point in time count issue raised. I honestly just don't understand it enough, so I should have mentioned that too. But you make a very good point. I've heard that same thing about this bill as being problematic.
And I think I would anticipate they probably perform a similar thing across other counties as well. It may not be done at the individual jurisdictional level, but our team can probably provide some of that information.
Okay.
Commissioner French?
Well, yeah, if we're done with 5867, I've got another question for Mike.
Okay. I've got one more comment on that though, because the point in time count for this year has been delayed. Normally it's the end of January. It's my understanding it's delayed until the end of February. So we won't even have a new point in time count. And it usually takes, for some reason, I don't know, Scott, months for us to get that information. So yes, and since the last 2 years, the point in time count has been through with COVID. Then Department of Commerce has kind of come up with their own numbers, which don't tie back to our point in time count. It's just problematic, I think.
One point of clarification I have too is I've been told, and I know this, that the legislature passed a requirement that you all do a homeless assessment every 5 years. There's a report done. Do you know when was the last time you did it? Because that's another point about this. And if you don't know off the top of your head, it's fine. I can ask Jeff to find out.
I don't know if that was done through the continuum of care that came out when we did our 5-year plan a couple of years ago. But yeah. I'm not sure if it's tied to that or not.
Scott, you know maybe?
I believe when we did that 5-year plan was, I think as a part of that 5-year plan was when we were standing up the continuum of care. I thought it was at the same time the continuum of care was formed. It was pre-COVID, but my guess would be 2019.
Yeah, I don't know the date either,
Okay.
Mike. I think both the commissioners are probably right, but I do think it gets performed through the continuum of care.
Okay, I'll ask. We don't need to bog the discussion down to that. I was just curious if you knew. Okay, sorry. That's it for that. I know what I need to be doing on 5867. Commissioner French, you mentioned you had something else.
Well, recently there's been some new energy around the idea of putting together a transportation package.
Yes.
And doing so without raising gas tax, but they'll raise every other tax and stuff. So I don't know whether this is political posturing or whether you think it's a serious conversation and that they think they might actually have the votes to get something done since there won't be any bonding associated with it. The D's could conceivably carry the bill, but that also means that they're going to be raising taxes on some of their constituents. So do you have a feel for this?
Yes. So, Commissioner, it was not on the agenda, but I was going to give you a heads up that we'll be talking soon about a transportation revenue package. The plan is for it to be released tomorrow publicly. I have a meeting with some of my colleagues at 3:00 today that follow that issue very closely from different angles. So I'll get some more details of it. There will not be a gas tax increase. It will be done by increasing fees and other revenue options. One that I've heard, though, is that there will be a $2 billion transfer from the state's general fund to fund this proposal. Again, that's not verified yet, but Olympia is a sieve. Once some of this stuff gets out, it starts leaking everywhere. So I've heard that one from a couple sources that are good and plugged in on this. So I'd imagine that to be the case. From a county there will be a project list as well. And so we'll have a list of projects that are prioritized to be funded. I do know, though, that the percentage of money that goes to counties for, say, CRAB, TIB, and the other pots that you can access are not seeing an increase. And so there will be a problem for the counties and no maintenance money. So, obviously it would seem to me if you were increasing the transportation budget by 10%, every pot of money should increase by 10%. That's a Mike Burgess logical argument. That doesn't seem to be the case with this. But I can't verify that yet. We'll get better information this week. How about I do this, commissioners? Once I get that bill or the proposals released tomorrow, I will get you something by tomorrow afternoon or Wednesday morning, listing out what's in it, and we can have a more detailed discussion on it next Monday. Commissioner, you are correct, though. It is not going to be bonded, and so does not require the bipartisanship that a transportation budget and, frankly, the capital budget normally requires. So this will be very political. As long as I've been in Olympia, that hasn't been the case. There's always been bipartisan support for transportation revenue packages. It's not always hugely bipartisan, but a lot of it, depended on projects and communities that we're seeing the benefits of those. So you're correct in the things that you said, but I again just don't have the details yet, and we'll have those tomorrow.
Commissioner French.
So there's so who are the major sponsors of this package that's coming forward? Is it FI or is it somebody else?
Well, it would be, to my understanding, it's Representative FI, but the new element to this is that Senator Lease is involved in transportation this year. You will note that Senator Hobbs was negotiating that for the Senate Democrats. He's now the Secretary of State. And then Senator Lease received the nod from his caucus to be the transportation chair. And so there's renewed interest in this from that perspective. I'm not suggesting, though, that if Senator Hobbs weren't the chair, this wouldn't be happening. I'm only telling you that that's one of the things that changed. There was a lot of talk that this was going on back in October, November, before Senator Hobbs was appointed Secretary of State, there was a lot of discussions going back and forth between House and Senate. Democrats kind of fizzled out. Then once the turn of the year, I know that once session began, those two chairs, and they have a team, they have other legislators that are involved with them. But it is not bipartisan, to my knowledge, that's been discussing it. Does that help answer that question?
Well, you're getting there. And so the total amount that they're talking about, I heard was 6 million. Is that a number you're hearing, or are you hearing a different number?
Well, the number I've heard for the overall
6
package
million.
is 15. 15 is the number I heard.
So if you got 2 coming from the general fund, that's 13 billion coming from fees, increase in fees.
Right, and you'll remember that this 15 billion number has been around the last handful of years, but it did include a gas tax increase. Commissioner Cuney, I know, has insight into this too, but.
Yeah, I mean, so part of what I'm hearing is 15 is the number, 15 billion is the number I'm hearing. I'm hearing 2 to 3 million coming from the general fund, hearing, like over $1 billion in new fees is how one of the billions is coming. So, and then the rest of it, a lot of it is coming from the federal transportation package, the infrastructure bill, down to the states. So they're putting that money into this package as well. So it's not all new money within the state. It's also money that's coming down from the federal.
And there's also the cap and trade stuff that was passed last session too. Commissioners fill in,
Yes.
and some of that was dedicated to multimodal.
And so one of my concerns that I'm hearing is, yes, it gets dropped tomorrow, and then it will be, the first hearing is on Thursday.
Yes.
So we're not going to have time for the 3 of us to get together with you. They'll probably just be individually, because there's just not going to be a lot of time to be able to respond.
Well, and I know though that from a broad county perspective, the lack of new maintenance funds and to your local Potts Crab tip, that'll be covered by, our colleagues. My colleague at the Association of Counties, I know, will testify on the bill and speak to that. The question for you all then is, as I communicate individually with our delegation members, what do we want our message to be? And we can work that out. I can work that out individually with you over the phone, or if we want to finalize that by Monday.
Yeah.
That's fine too. I don't think, I understand your concern, Commissioner, about a time crunch, but this has a ways to go. So we'll have time to communicate unless you do want to weigh in by Thursday.
And I think the other thing is the project list that's being put together is a list that's being put together by one side of the aisle, but people are not, it has not been discussed with both parties.
Correct. This is not a bipartisan effort.
Commissioner French.
Well, and I think you touched on this. The other part of it is that there's not anticipated to be any maintenance money in this thing. This is all ribbon cutting stuff, and ribbon cutting stuff prior to the election. So it's about delivering promises, I think. So when you talk, do you think that our local delegation will play a role in this, or is this going to be driven by the other side of the state?
Well, I mean, you just look at the political part of your district. You do have 3 members of the majority party that are all 3 are frankly pretty key players in the legislative process. And again, everything I've been told is will be partisan, and I could be wrong about that because again, it hasn't had its hearing even yet. But it's going to take. The majority can't lose a lot of votes for this to pass. I guess I'd say it that way. And so when you have members of leadership and key players, and it obviously, Senator Billig's role, and then Representative Ormsby operating budget, so not necessarily associated, but Representative Riccelli does serve on the Transportation Committee.
Yeah, so this is going to be more about let's make a deal than it is really, being strategic.
Well, yeah,
That's all right. It's my statement. That's all right.
understood. Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me get the details on that over the next 24, 48 hours, 36 hours, and then I can reach out to each individually if you'd like. Sounds like that's a plan for that. Okay. And as far as a budget letter, we've taken a lot of time today. I don't know. We can revisit that next week too, because I think we'll have a little more time then.
And just to refresh us on the budget letter with Wasac, it's just, is it signing on to their letter or?
No, I thought you might want to pick and choose.
That's right.
As I read the letter, I just didn't know if the three of you would want to communicate all of those exact same priorities. Not that you don't agree with them. It's just, it's a long letter. Maybe it made sense to pick and choose a few, maybe add some of our own. So that was what my thinking was there. So I had emailed it to you last week for you to get a chance to take a look at it, and maybe we can spend more time on it next week.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that sound fair to the three of you? Okay.
Yes.
All righty. I've got what I need. I'll reach out to Jeff about that 5867 and then get you what as much as I can on transportation tomorrow once I see it. Okay.
Thank you very much,
Anything else from
Mike.
me? We good?
I think we're great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you all. Have a good day. Bye.
Okay. You too. Bye. Okay. So next on the agenda, I have Mark McLean. I'm not sure which topic we're taking today and if it's pending and potential litigation, and we're going to executive session.
Sure. Both of my topics would fall under pending and potential litigation, one of which we were going to discuss was the issue of a bankruptcy that had been filed that we've been dealing with. That issue, we have not received the information that we will need in order to brief you on that. We're looking for some settlement numbers from some individuals, and we don't have that for you today. So I would propose that we maybe take this tomorrow or next week. Either's fine with us.
Happy to, whichever, if you have the information by tomorrow, we can take it tomorrow. Otherwise, we can wait till next week.
It's fairly fast moving. I think if at this stage we thought we would get it, it might just simply be better and easier for everyone to put it on a Monday and then take it by leave next week on Tuesday, if that works for everyone.
Okay.
Okay. The next issue is related to membership on the Board of Health. And part of this is certainly fine for open session. The other would be for related to pending litigation, related to a briefing I can provide related to the American Indian Health Commission's appointment letter. So I don't know how you want to handle that.
I will let you choose.
Okay. I can certainly start with the open session of this. As you'll recall, on December 17th, you sent the American Indian Health Commission of Washington a letter seeking an appointment. As you'll recall, you've decided to follow the proposed Board of Health's WAC and have a place for the American Health Indians appointment. And it appears what has occurred is they've sent an email from the Native Project, which seems to suggest that the tribal representatives or the American Indian Health Commission seems to believe that perhaps the legislation that was proposed suggests that you could that every tribe in our county, including those who have a 501c3 or reasonable and accustomed lands, are all each entitled to a seat on the local Board of Health. And of course, I will provide our briefing, but that's not how we read that. I don't think that's how WASEC sees that either. So I have the balance of mine would be an executive session related to my view of that law. That would be 11:52, and it would take about 5 minutes to provide. I'd say 10 minutes to provide a briefing, and I would anticipate coming back with
probably a letter for you for the American Health Commission to outline specifically what your request is.
Okay. So that would be about 10 minutes is what you're anticipating,
That's correct.
and possible action after.
Potentially, if you want to take that action, yes.
So we will, it is 10:56. It'll take us just a few minutes. It always takes us a few minutes to transition into executive session. So I am going to say, well, my clock says now 10:57. So I'm going to say we're going to go into executive session at 11 o'clock to 11:10. And then be back into open session around 11:10. It'll be the 3 county commissioners, our executive management team, Mark McLean, our civil attorney, that will be in that executive session, and we will come back at 11:10. And this is to discuss pending and potential litigation.
Right. Well, I have the ability to operate the slides. Can we set that up too, or take control of the screen?
Okay, yep, hopefully.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back to our Monday, February 7th, 2022, 9 a.m. strategic planning meeting. We are out of executive session. Please note that we did extend executive session to 11:25. It was extended for 15 minutes. It has taken us a few minutes to then switch from our executive session back into our open session. We were joined by Eric Johnson, the Executive Director for WASAC, during our executive session. Thank you, and I will look to my fellow commissioner.
Madam Chair, I would move that we approve the drafting and signing of a letter by the majority of the board, and other than an open public meeting, to the, and I'm going to ask Mr. McLean to give me the proper name for the organization we need to send this letter to.
American Indian Health Commission for Washington State.
Thank you. Relative to the appointment for the Spokane Regional Health District Board of Directors.
I will second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Is there any other miscellaneous items that anyone would like to bring forward? If not, then we will adjourn and we will reconvene tomorrow at 2 o'clock for our 2 o'clock consent agenda. And we will see you all tomorrow. Thank you.